Eleanor's, or Ellie's, as everyone called her. Old Honda Civic rolled into the modest apartment complex in South Austin on a sweltering Sunday afternoon. The August air was thick with heat, clinging damply to the skin. Ellie turned off the engine, resting her head against the steering wheel. The buzzing in her ears still not entirely faded, after a long weekend immersed in laughter, social hugs, and rambling conversations at the annual family gathering at her parents' house, only about a 45-minute drive away if traffic was good. But now, returning to her small studio apartment, her only sanctuary, all she felt was an emptiness and exhaustion that reached deep into her bones. Everything seemed normal. Junk mail waited on the doormat, the snake plant in the corner remained stubbornly green despite occasional neglect from its owner, and the stack of single dishes piled by the sink testified to the late, hurried dinners of a freelance graphic designer. Ellie kicked her sneakers into a corner, dropped her heavy handbag onto the floor, and dragged herself toward the refrigerator, hoping some cold water could soothe the dull headache throbbing behind her eyes. At least it was quiet here, free from the forced laughter of her sister Sophia or the passive-aggressive complaints of her mother Isabel. She sank onto the worn-out sofa and opened her phone, intending to transfer money for the upcoming electricity bill. A boring but necessary task. She opened her banking app, bypassed the login screen with Face ID, and waited for the familiar number to appear. Then it appeared. $75.19. Ellie's vision blurred. She rubbed her eyes, certain she was misreading due to fatigue. $75.19? Impossible. She closed the app, took a deep breath, and opened it again. Still the same number, stark and cold. $75.19. She checked a third time, then a fourth, her heart beginning to pound like it wanted to break out of her chest. Just last Friday, only 2 days ago, she was certain this account held over $12,000. The result of months of grinding work, sacrificing sleep for logo design projects, brand identity packages, and websites for clients. It was her entire emergency savings, her buffer fund for the unstable months of freelance work. An icy chill ran down her spine, feeling as though the blood was draining from her body. This wasn't a system error. This wasn't a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. This was real. Over $12,000 had vanished. Ellie's hand trembled as she looked up the bank's customer support number. The hold music played monotonously while she tried to breathe evenly. After a few security questions, full name, date of birth, last 4 digits of her social security number, and address, the calm voice of the representative came on the line. Ms. Vance, I see a series of large transfer transactions made yesterday, Saturday. What transactions? I didn't make any transactions. Ellie's voice cracked, betraying the panic she couldn't hide. These transactions were made from a device previously logged into your account, ma'am. The IP address matches the home address you registered. No, wait a moment. It precisely matches the IP address of a personal computer at the address on Maple Creek Drive. Maple Creek Drive. That was her parents' address. The place she had left just hours ago. Ellie shot up, the phone nearly slipping from her grasp. She stammered a thank you and hung up. Without a second thought, she grabbed her keys, rushed out of the apartment, leaving the unopened mail and dirty dishes behind. She had to go back there. Immediately. The car sped down I-35, the heavy Sunday afternoon traffic in Austin blurring through the hot tears that started to well up. Ellie's mind raced. Images of everyone hugging, laughing, toasting during the weekend gathering replayed over and over, overlapping with the grim number 75.19. Who? How? Why? Her sister Sophia, always complaining about needing money for auditions and outfits to build her image. Her brother-in-law, Marcus, always full of genius business ideas that never panned out, frequently borrowing a few $100s from Ellie. No, she couldn't bear to think further. Just hours before, she had been sitting in the old kitchen she grew up in, filled with fake laughter, and now she was driving back to that very place, but with a sense of horror and betrayal rising like bile in her throat. Ellie practically burst through the door. The air inside still carried the faint smell of roasted meat from lunch, but the feigned coziness had vanished, replaced by an invisible tension. Sophia was lounging cross-legged on the armchair in the living room, holding a glass of red wine, her expression indifferent, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, you're back already. That was quick." Sophia's voice was light, without a hint of surprise or concern. Ellie tried to keep her voice steady, but the tremor was undeniable. "I just checked my bank account." Marcus emerged from the kitchen holding a soda can, leaning against the refrigerator. He smirked, a half-mocking, half-dismissive smile Ellie knew all too well. Oh, that? Ellie looked straight at him. What is that, Marcus? Sophia shrugged nonchalantly, taking a sip of wine. We just needed the money more than you did, Ellie. The words hit her like a physical slap. Ellie froze, stunned, her ears ringing, unable to form a single word. Needed it more than her? What had they done? Don't be so dramatic, Sophia added, her tone suggesting Ellie was overreacting. You've got a good job, freelance, flexible income, no debt, no kids, living alone. What's the big deal? Ellie turned to her mother, Isabel, who was sitting quietly in the corner, knitting, her expression unnervingly calm. Mom. Ellie's voice faltered with pain. Did you know about this? Isabel sighed, her eyes never leaving her knitting needles. Her voice was as gentle as ever, as if Ellie had just complained about the soup being too salty. You're always so sensitive, Ellie, dear. You're better off helping family out a little. What's wrong with that? Helping? Ellie nearly shouted. This isn't helping. This is stealing. How did you even get into my account? Sophia shrugged again, her casualness bordering on cruel. You used Mom's computer last weekend and forgot to log out of your bank account. I just happened to see it. If you weren't so careless, this wouldn't have happened. She spoke as if the fault lay entirely with Ellie, as if their actions were perfectly justified. Ellie's hands clenched, nails digging into her palms. Her heart hammered wildly. She turned to her father, Richard, who had been glued to his phone the entire time, silent. He just mumbled him without looking up. Don't use harsh words. It's family business. Marcus chuckled dryly. It's not like we bought luxury stuff. Rent, groceries, just little things to get by. Otherwise, we'd all be starving. Ellie looked around at the familiar faces in the room. Her sister, her brother-in-law, her mother, her father. Not one apology, not a flicker of guilt, not a proper explanation. Only excuses, blame-shifting, and an appalling indifference. What did I do wrong? Ellie whispered, though no one seemed to care. The feeling of betrayal, of being utterly disregarded, swirled in her chest, painful and chilling. They hadn't just taken her money, they had taken her trust, the last shred of respect she held for them. Sophia tossed her dyed blonde hair back, muttering, You'll earn it back. Don't be so dramatic. Ellie felt her throat tighten, her chest constricting. The initial shock was slowly hardening into a cold fury, a resolve beginning to spark from the ashes of her shattered trust. Ellie slammed the car door shut, the harsh sound echoing in the deceptively quiet suburban street. She sat frozen behind the wheel, hands clenched white-knuckled, her chest still aching from the words and attitudes of her own family. The initial shock had subsided slightly, replaced by a terrifying emptiness mixed with a simmering rage. She started the engine, the car slowly rolling away from the house she had still called home just hours before. Now it felt more like a crime scene, the scene of betrayal and bottomless greed. She drove aimlessly, cruising familiar Austin streets under the harsh afternoon sun. The glare through the windshield hurt her eyes, but the pain inside was far worse. She needed air. She needed somewhere to breathe, to sort through the horrific chaos that had just crashed down on her. Subconsciously, she headed towards Zilker Park, finding a parking spot out of sight near the trail bordering the Ladybird Lake. Turning off the engine, Ellie rolled down the window, letting the hot, humid breeze blow against her face, carrying the characteristic scent of grass and lake water. Silence. Only the rustle of wind through the leaves and the distant laughter of people jogging and cycling. This peaceful contrast only deepened the wound in Ellie's heart. The words of Sophia, Marcus, and even her mother echoed in her mind. We needed the money more than you. You've got a good job. Don't be so dramatic, and sharing with family is the right thing to do. Sharing? Or being blatantly exploited? A memory suddenly flashed through her mind, as vivid as if it had just happened. It was about 2 years ago. Sophia had called, her voice full of excitement. Ellie, you have to help me. I found this amazing headshot photographer, but he's a bit pricey. This is a golden opportunity to get professional photos for casting calls. Ellie, struggling with a few small freelance projects at the time, was short on cash. She hesitated, explaining her situation, but Sophia immediately changed her tone to make it half pleading, half reproachful. I know you're always practical, but this is my career. Don't you want to see me succeed? In the end, Ellie transferred nearly $500, money she had planned to use for upgrading her design software. Those headshots, of course, led to no breakthrough roles. Then there was Marcus. About a year ago, he enthusiastically presented $1 million startup idea. Some online platform that sounded far-fetched even as he described it. He needed a little seed money, about $2,000. Ellie refused outright, saying she couldn't afford it, but then her mother Isabel called soon after. "Marcus is really passionate about this, dear." Her voice was sweet. "Who knows, maybe this time it will succeed. You're the most stable one in the family. Give your brother-in-law a hand. Think of it as an investment in our family's future." The pressure from her mother, combined with the exhaustion of arguing, led Ellie to eventually give him the money. That money vanished without a trace, just like the $1 million idea, and all the other emergencies. Mom's unexpected medical bill that insurance didn't fully cover. Dad's old car suddenly breaking down and needing urgent repairs. Every single time Ellie was the first person they called. Every single time it was phrases like, "Only you can help. You're the most reliable one. We know you won't say no." And she hadn't said no. She had canceled a camping trip to Big Bend with her best friends because Sophia really needed money for a new apartment deposit after a breakup. She had eaten instant ramen for a whole week to send money to her mom for an overdue utility bill. She had postponed buying a new graphics tablet, even though her old one was painfully slow, just because Marcus had run into some unexpected trouble again. She had done all of it silently, telling herself it was responsibility, it was family love. She was the most stable one, the one who was better off. They said those words like compliments, like acknowledgments. But now, sitting alone in her old car, facing the brutal truth of her empty bank account, Ellie finally understood the real meaning behind those phrases. It wasn't acknowledgement. It was an imposition, an unspoken declaration. It was her duty to provide, to sacrifice, to put their needs above her own. They never asked if she was okay. Never asked if her freelance work was enough to live on, if some months were harder than others. Never stopped to think that she also had dreams, her own desires, that she also needed to save for her own future. In their eyes, Ellie was a walking ATM, an endless financial resource that never ran dry, someone who never needed help, and therefore was obligated to help everyone else. The chime of an incoming text message broke through Ellie's thoughts. It was her mother. The short message was enough to reignite Ellie's anger. "Ellie, dear, I know you're upset about the money, but don't make such a big deal out of it, honey. We're family." Family. Why did that word feel so heavy and fake now? She still didn't understand. Or pretended not to. Still that same tone, downplaying the issue, blaming Ellie's sensitivity, and using the word family like a shield to justify an unacceptable act. Ellie took a deep breath, trying to suppress the urge to throw her phone into the lake. Number, she wouldn't lose her temper. She wouldn't scream pointlessly. The pain and indignation were slowly crystallizing into something else, a cold determination. She had been silent for too long. She had sacrificed too much. She had let them cross every boundary because she blindly believed in the word family. It was time to stop. She opened the Notes app on her phone. Her fingers still trembled slightly, but her mind had become painfully clear. She started typing, not to demand it back, at least not yet, but to remember, to never forget, to never allow herself to be put in this position again. Headshots for Sophia, $500. June 2023. Startup capital for Marcus, $2,000. April 2024. Mom's medical bill, $850. January 2025. Dad's car repair, $600. March 2025. Sophia's emergency rent, $1,200. July 2024. The list grew longer, each line a cut to her heart, but also a brick laid in the fortress wall that would protect her in the future. The afternoon wind still blew, the lake surface still rippled, but inside Ellie a different kind of storm was just beginning to gather. Ellie returned to her apartment as dusk settled. The tension and disappointment from her time at the park still lingered in the air, but now something else was rising within her, a cold, sharp determination. The pain of betrayal was still there, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it became fuel, driving her to act. She was no longer the victim weeping over her fate. She would be the one seeking truth and justice for herself. That night, Ellie barely slept. She sat in front of her computer screen, her eyes dry but intensely focused. The first thing she did was access her bank's online portal and submit a formal request for detailed statements of all transactions going back 3 years. The system indicated the files would be emailed within 24 to 48 business hours. The waiting period felt endless, but Ellie didn't sit idle. She rummaged through old storage boxes, retrieving bills, text messages, and email exchanges with her family regarding previous loans. She had always kept everything, not out of paranoia, but as an unconscious self-defense reflex of someone always needing to plan ahead. Now that habit proved bitterly useful. Every scrap of a Zello message from Sophia begging for acting class fees, every lengthy email from Marcus explaining a can't-miss investment opportunity needing urgent capital, every note about transfers to her mother for unexpected expenses. Ellie systematically organized it all. The next day, when the hefty bank statement file arrived in her email, Ellie spent the entire evening scrutinizing it. 17 pages filled with dense columns of numbers. She printed everything out, took a red pen, and started marking every outgoing transfer, every suspicious cash withdrawal. And then she saw it. A transfer of nearly $2,800 made the previous Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of the boisterous family gathering. The IP address making the transaction matched her parents' home address. Yes, she had used the computer there, but only briefly to check email in her work calendar. She never logged into her bank account and just left it open like that. Someone in that house hadn't just stumbled upon her information. Someone had deliberately accessed it, memorized the login details and password, and waited for the right moment to strike. Anger surged through Ellie again, this time mixed with disgust. The cold calculation was the most horrifying part. Over the next 3 nights, Ellie turned her small living room into a makeshift investigation center. She created a detailed Excel spreadsheet, entering every single amount she had transferred to her family over the past 3 years. She categorized them meticulously. Green for truly necessary and verifiable expenses, like her mother's hospital bills, yellow for regular but one-sided living expenses, and red for completely unreasonable or suspicious amounts, like the $1,350 Marcus had urgently borrowed, which Ellie later discovered coincided with him showing off the latest gaming console purchase around Black Friday last year. She remembered that time clearly because she had to cancel a winter trip with former colleagues just to make her own insurance payment on time. Each number, each line item was another stab wound, but it also strengthened her resolve. The lengthy spreadsheet was irrefutable proof of the systematic exploitation she had endured. The following Sunday, Ellie drove to her parents' house. She tried to act normal, as if it were just another routine weekend visit. The smell of roast beef from the kitchen was as familiar as ever, but the atmosphere in the house was thick with artificial tension. Sophia sat at the head of the dining table, avoiding Ellie's gaze. Marcus acted overly relaxed, constantly pouring lemonade, as if there wasn't a fire burning beneath the surface. Her mother maintained her usual gentle demeanor, while her father hid behind the sports section. Ellie didn't waste time. After a few polite greetings, she placed the stack of bank statements, marked in red, on the table right in the middle of the meal. "I've reviewed all my transactions." Her voice was calm but firm. "A large sum, nearly $2,800, was transferred from my account last Saturday afternoon from a computer in this house." No one answered. Her mother lowered her head, picking at her salad as if Ellie had just asked about the weather. Her father rustled his newspaper slightly. Only Sophia spoke first, her voice small but laced with sarcasm. "I told you already. You forgot to log out. You have to accept that. It's not like we hacked your account." Ellie looked directly at her sister. "So you admit you saw it and made the transaction?" Sophia shrugged. "Well, I saw it open. You didn't lock the screen. Besides, it's not the first time you've helped the family." "This time, I didn't agree," Ellie stated unequivocally. Marcus set his glass down with a soft click, deliberately provocative. "You always overreact. This isn't stealing. It's helping each other out. It's family." "No," Ellie cut him off, her voice sharp. "Helping is when someone asks and the other agrees. This was taking without asking." Isabel finally looked up, her voice still gentle, as if explaining something to a stubborn child. "Ellie, dear, you live alone. Have a good job, no burdens. Sophia is raising a child. Marcus is still finding his way. Family is about sharing with each other." "Does sharing mean secretly draining my savings account, Mom?" Ellie's voice began to tremble, not from anger, but from no immense pain. Richard folded his newspaper, looking at her with visible annoyance. "Don't be so harsh. You've always been the strongest one in this family. Everyone knows only you can handle it. That's why they trusted you." "Trusted me?" Ellie let out a dry, humorless laugh. Stealing personal information and emptying my bank account is what you call trust? Why not just call it what it is? Taking advantage. For the first time, Sophia lost her composure. She slammed her hand on the table. We didn't waste it. It was for rent, medicine for Haley, car repairs. Do you think I'm not tired? You're tired? Ellie stared intently at each person in the room. The people she once called him family. What about me? Wasn't I tired working 60 hours a week to pay off someone else's debt? When I canceled my vacation ticket just so Marcus wouldn't get evicted? When I ate ramen noodles for 3 weeks straight to help Mom pay the electricity bill? I've been tired for a very long time, but I never complained because I thought I was doing the right thing. But clearly all I did was enable everyone's selfishness. No one said a word. Only the steady ticking of the kitchen clock filled the heavy silence. Ellie stood up, gathered her papers, and put them back in her purse. Before leaving the dining room, she paused, looking directly at her mother. If this is how you treat the only child who never asked for a single cent from the family, then don't be surprised when I start taking back what belongs to me. Marcus let out a mocking laugh. What are you going to do? Call the cops, Ellie. Ellie met his gaze directly, her eyes steady and cold. Just wait and see. Then she turned and walked out of the house she once called home, for the first time without a trace of regret, only a fierce sense of resolve surging in her chest. Monday morning, Ellie dressed professionally, carrying a thick file containing all the evidence she had gathered, bank statements, printouts of messages and emails, the detailed spreadsheet, along with a USB drive containing the digital files. She drove to the Austin Police Department headquarters, finding her way to the Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. The serious, formal atmosphere of the building was unlike anything she had known. She felt as though she had just crossed a threshold from which there was no return. A young female officer, name tag reading Officer Ramirez, received her case. She had a professional demeanor, listening carefully as Ellie explained the situation, flipping through each page of the documents Ellie provided. Occasionally, she nodded or quickly jotted down a note. We will conduct a preliminary investigation based on the allegations of financial fraud and unauthorized access to personal information, Officer Ramirez said after reviewing everything, her voice firm. The evidence you provided is quite detailed. Do you have the names of the individuals involved? Yes, Ellie replied, her voice steadier than she expected. She handed the officer the list she had prepared. Sophia Vance, Marcus Bell, Isabel Vance, Richard Vance. Writing down the names of her own parents and sister was one of the hardest things Ellie had ever done, but she knew she had no other choice. Ellie left the police station under the gray skies of Monday morning. She didn't feel triumphant or victorious, only a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy stone that had been weighing on her heart for years had finally been lifted. She had spoken up. She had taken action. For the rest, she could only wait. The next 2 weeks passed in a tense, suffocating silence. Ellie tried to bury herself in work, taking on a few extra small design projects to keep her mind occupied. She worked like a machine, logo sketches, color palettes, and website layouts consuming her thoughts during the day. But at night, when the apartment fell quiet, anxiety crept back in. Every unexpected phone notification made her heart jump. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if the consequences would go too far. But then, the images of her family's cold faces and harsh words would resurface, strengthening her resolve. She had chosen this path, and she had to see it through. One Thursday afternoon, while Ellie was in a Zoom meeting with a client, an unknown number called. She muted her microphone and stepped onto her small balcony overlooking the noisy Austin street to answer. Ms. Vance? Officer Ramirez's professional voice came through. Yes, speaking, Ellie replied, her heart quickening. We've completed the preliminary investigation. There are sufficient grounds to proceed. The investigative unit will be visiting the residences of the individuals named in your report, possibly as early as today or tomorrow. Ellie stood frozen on the sun-drenched balcony. A strange feeling washed over her. Not satisfaction, but a heavy kind of relief, mixed with a profound sadness. It was real now. The complaints, the statements were no longer just pieces of paper. They had set a real legal process in motion. And now, the people she had once loved most were about to face it. That night, as Ellie was preparing a simple dinner for herself, her phone began ringing incessantly. First her mother, Isabel, then Sophia, then Marcus. Ellie watched the screen light up again and again, but she didn't answer. She knew why they were calling. Soon after, the text messages started pouring in. Isabel. Ellie, what are you doing? How could you do this to your own mother? Call me back now. Sophia. My bank account is frozen. I can't pay Haley's tuition. Are you happy now, Ellie? You've destroyed everything. Marcus. What the hell did you do? You'll regret this. Tell them it was just a misunderstanding. Isabel. Think about your father's health. He can't handle this shock. You're killing this family. Each message felt like a dagger twisting in her heart, but Ellie noticed something crucial. Not a single apology, not a shred of remorse, only panic, blame, and attempts to manipulate her with guilt. An hour later, another text arrived from an old neighbor who lived near her parents. Ellie, dear, there are several people in jackets labeled Financial Crimes Unit outside Isabel's house. They asked about you, too. What's going on? So, it had begun. Ellie put her phone down and feeling both cold and strangely steady. The next day, while Ellie was exchanging emails with a major client, David, the main project manager for that client, someone she had worked with for years and trusted, called unexpectedly. Ellie, David's voice held a slight hesitation. I just received a call from a local reporter asking to verify a financial investigation involving your name and your family. Ellie was silent for a moment. David continued, his voice warm and sympathetic. We didn't confirm anything, of course, but I just wanted you to know. If you need time off or any support, don't hesitate to tell me. We have complete faith in your professionalism. A small, grateful smile touched Ellie's lips. Thank you, David. I'm okay. I'm just doing what needs to be done. The support from an outsider, someone who respected her for who she was and the quality of her work, felt like a precious balm at that moment. It reminded her that kindness and fairness still existed outside the toxic circle of her family. That evening, Ellie sat by her apartment window, watching the lights twinkle from the surrounding buildings. Sophia's words echoed in her head. You've destroyed everything. Had she destroyed it? Or was she merely cleaning up the wreckage they had created over so many years? They saw her as the pillar of the family bank, but they never treated her like a human being with feelings and limits. And now that the bank had learned to protect itself, they called it destruction. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line, I am not the family bank. I am Eleanor Vance. For the first time in years, she saw her name on a page not tied to a bill to pay or a money transfer request. Just her name. A person. And freedom, however fragile, was finally within reach. A few days later, Officer Ramirez called again with more specific updates. We have confirmed the amount withdrawn and misused, Ms. Vance. Sophia Vance is currently under investigation for unauthorized fund transfers. Marcus Bell is also implicated in withdrawing funds from an unauthorized device. More seriously, there's evidence indicating your parents used part of the money for illicit mortgage payments, which could lead to asset recovery. Ellie listened, unsure how to feel. A part of her ached. Not because of the consequences they now faced, but because even at this moment, they likely still didn't understand how things had ever come to this. They still thought this was her fault, that she was overreacting. That night, Marcus called repeatedly from different numbers. Ellie blocked them all. Less than 10 minutes later, she received an email from an unfamiliar address. Ellie, please. I've been suspended from work, if he had a temporary job. They're investigating my accounts. I can't lose everything over one mistake. Can't you say something to help me? The arrogance, the mockery from before had vanished, replaced by thinly veiled panic, but Ellie didn't flinch. Thursday morning, she received a text from her father. He rarely reached out, so even a single line made her pause. The bank sent a foreclosure warning. If we don't pay within 30 days, we lose the house. Ellie read it over and over, no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a cold statement and a faint hope that, like always, she would step in to fix it. She didn't reply. But that night, standing by her window, watching the streetlight cast shadows on the glass, she thought of all the times she'd skipped lunch to wire money to her mom on time, the dates she had canceled because Sophia called her in tears. She'd given not just her money, but her peace. This time, she wasn't going back. The storm was still raging fiercely around her family, but Ellie was no longer standing in its eye. She had stepped outside, still feeling the force of the wind and the flying debris, but she was no longer being swept away. 3 weeks passed since Officer Ramirez's last call. The initial media storm, if any, and the barrage of messages from her family had subsided, replaced by a heavy, awkward silence. Ellie knew the investigation was ongoing and real legal consequences were still ahead for her family. But she realized something more important. To truly heal, she needed to leave. Leave Austin, leave Texas, leave everything that reminded her of that painful past. Even though she had cut off contact, living in the same city, breathing the same air, still made her feel invisibly tethered. She remembered a brief work trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, years ago. Just a few hours wandering through the historic plaza with its distinctive adobe buildings, sipping coffee in a cozy little cafe playing soft jazz under warm yellow lights, but the feeling of peace, tranquility, and the slightly bohemian artistic vibe of the place had stayed with her. Santa Fe. That would be where she started over. Ellie applied for an extended unpaid leave of absence, simultaneously convincing her main client via Davis to allow her to continue working remotely as a freelancer for the foreseeable future. Fortunately, David and the management agreed. They valued her skills and wanted to keep her. She began planning in secret, renting a small moving truck, packing her belongings neatly, getting rid of anything unnecessary. The process was both sad and strangely liberating. Each old item discarded felt like shedding old skin, a part of the old self who always lived for others. On a cloudy Wednesday morning, Ellie drove out of Austin. She didn't say goodbye to anyone in her family. The journey across the arid southwestern states, the landscape changing from green pastures to majestic red rock deserts, mirrored her internal transformation. She felt free, though still shadowed by a vague anxiety about the future. When the sun-grayed Cristo Mountains appeared in the distance under the distinct, piercing blue New Mexico sky, Ellie knew she had come to the right place. Santa Fe welcomed her with clean, dry air and brilliant yet gentle sunlight. She rented a small studio apartment on the second floor of a Pueblo-style building, with a balcony overlooking rolling hills. White walls, large windows catching the morning light, the space simple but airy. For the first time in years, she could arrange everything exactly as she wanted, without needing to make space for anyone else's needs or belongings. She bought a new desk, filled rustic pottery vases with fresh flowers, and hung a few abstract paintings she loved on the walls. She got a new phone number, sharing it only with a few close friends and essential work contacts. And something miraculous happened. No longer drained of energy by her family's demands and negativity, Ellie's vitality gradually returned. She slept better, ate regularly. When she sat at her desk, her mind felt clearer and more focused than ever. Design ideas flowed freely. Her work became increasingly efficient and highly praised. Just 2 weeks after settling in Santa Fe, David called. "Ellie, I just reviewed the new strategic plan you sent over. Brilliant. Have you considered taking on the role of design coordinator for the entire West Coast region?" Ellie paused for a second. A year ago, if she had heard those words, she probably would have refused. She would have thought of her mother, of Sophia, of Marcus, of the invisible responsibilities that always weighed her down. But now, looking out the window where sunlight sparkled through the pine trees, she took a deep breath and answered firmly, "I'm ready, David." David chuckled on the other end. "I knew it. You were the first person who came to mind. Congratulations, Ellie." When the call ended, Ellie made herself a cup of herbal tea, curled up in a warm woolen blanket on the balcony, letting the gentle breeze run through her hair. She had done it. She had pulled herself out of that vicious cycle, the cycle where she was always the one giving and no one ever asked, "Are you okay?" No more late-night texts demanding money. No more desperate calls like, "It's just a loan, I'll pay you back by the end of the month." No more checking her bank account each morning with quiet panic. Now, every message she received came from people who genuinely cared. Former colleagues, a few close friends, or a couple of new acquaintances she'd met through a pottery class in Santa Fe. They didn't ask for money. They simply asked, "How are you feeling today?" Or "Want to grab dinner tonight?" She hadn't just found freedom, she had found herself again. One afternoon, while sitting in a familiar cafe on Canyon Road, Ellie received an email from an unfamiliar sender, Chloe Martin. It took her a few seconds to place the name. Chloe was Marcus's cousin, the wife of some distant cousin of Sophia's. Ellie had only met her briefly a few times at family gatherings, a quiet girl who always stayed in the background and rarely spoke up. Ellie hadn't even known she had her email address. The subject line read, "Thank you, Ellie." Curious, she opened it. "Ellie, you probably don't remember me well. I'm Chloe, Aunt Grace's daughter. I once babysat Haley for Sophia one summer, and you gave me a ride home after Haley's birthday party once. I was silent for years, thinking I didn't have the right to speak up. My family always said I was luckier, so I had to give more. I used to work 3 jobs at once, and still had to send money home for my mom, for my brother. Every time I tried to say no, they called me ungrateful, selfish. But after hearing what happened with you, how you stood up, how you drew a line, I could not send this message. Your story somehow lit a path I never knew existed. You helped me realize that saying no isn't cruel, it's self-protection. It's preserving the most precious thing, yourself. Thank you for giving me courage. Ellie sat quietly, hands wrapped around the now cold teacup. Each word Chloe wrote felt like a drop falling into the still pond within her. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the golden aspen leaves, sending a few gently tumbling to the ground. But inside her, something had quietly begun to bloom. It wasn't pride. It wasn't vindication. It was the feeling of being seen, of being understood. Chloe wasn't the first. A few weeks earlier, Sarah, an old college friend, had texted after reading a few lines Ellie shared on a personal blog she had tentatively started again. I used to think you were just super strong, like you didn't need anyone, but now I get it. You were so strong that everyone just assumed you'd always be fine, no matter what. Ellie had read that line over and over, because for years, she never asked to be heard. She stayed quiet, held it all in. But no one had ever taught her that kindness doesn't mean letting people trample your boundaries. That night, Ellie sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and typed a reply to Chloe. I never imagined what I did could inspire someone like that. Thank you for having the courage to share. I know that's not easy, but I want you to remember, you are not alone. You are not selfish. You're just learning to love yourself the right way, and there is nothing wrong with that. She hit send. And in that moment, something became crystal clear. She used to think she had lost her family, but the truth was, she was redefining it. A family built from people who love without conditions, who give without expectation, and who respect others as whole human beings. The next morning when Ellie pulled back the curtains, sunlight poured into the room like a gentle blessing. She took a deep breath, feeling no heaviness in her chest anymore. She was no longer the old Ellie, the girl who always stepped aside, who always stayed quiet for fear of upsetting others. Now, she was Ellie, who knew how to say enough, who knew when to walk away when someone didn't value her. And the most beautiful part was, she wasn't alone. Because out there, somewhere, people like Chloe were finding the courage to step out of the shadows. And if her journey could light even a small part of their path, then every bit of pain she had endured was worth it. She started doing the little things she had once put off, learning to cook her favorite risotto, buying a bright red dress she used to think was too bold, signing up for a weekend pottery class just because the feeling of clay in her hands made her feel alive. She no longer hoped for her family to understand. She didn't wait for an apology call from Sophia or a surprise message from her mother. Maybe one day they would look back and understand. Or maybe not. And either way, that was okay now. She used to think love meant holding on tightly. Now she knew. Sometimes love means letting go, letting yourself and others be accountable for their own choices. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And when Ellie stopped burning herself for their expectations, she realized the warmest light doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from the peace of living true to who you are. Ellie stood on her balcony watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in fiery shades of orange and red. The cool desert night air brushed against her skin. No more rushing, no more escaping, no more burdens. Just her, Eleanor Vance, standing there, breathing in the free air and quietly smiling at the pace she had fought so hard to reclaim.